My brother completely ruined my wedding by revealing secrets and causing chaos, leaving me heartbroken and questioning everyone I trusted that I never imagined my own brother could ruin the happiest day of my life. The wedding had been planned for over a year, every flower carefully chosen, every table arranged perfectly, every guest thoughtfully invited. I was nervous, excited, and just a little overwhelmed, but I never suspected that the one person I should be able to rely on would turn it all into chaos. The morning started smoothly enough. My fiancée was glowing, the bridesmaids were bustling around, and the photographer was capturing every tiny moment. I remember trying to sip my coffee while my heart raced, rehearsing my vows silently when my brother arrived. At first, I thought he was just being his usual cocky self, joking and teasing everyone. But soon I noticed his smirk didn't feel playful. It felt calculated. As the ceremony approached, he started whispering helpful advice to our parents. He planted little doubts and questions, sly comments about my fiancée that made my mom frown and my dad glance at me nervously. I tried to brush it off, assuming he was just nervous or excited, but there was something darker in the way he was. Watching everyone's reactions. Then came the reception, and that's when it turned catastrophic. My brother, clearly a few drinks in, took the microphone for his speech. I trusted him to be funny, maybe a little embarrassing in a harmless way, but instead, he started dropping personal secrets no one needed to hear. He mentioned a past fling I had confided in him years ago, brought up embarrassing moments about my fiancée, and even insinuated that there were hidden issues between us. The room went from lively chatter to stunned silence almost instantly. Guests glanced at one another uncomfortably. Some whispered behind their hands. Others looked shocked. My maid of honor's eyes were wide, and she mouthed, "What is he doing?" I could feel my blood boiling and my cheeks burning with humiliation. My parents looked frozen, trying to maintain polite smiles, but their eyes betrayed panic and disbelief. I tried to recover the situation, cracking a joke, smiling awkwardly, hoping to steer attention away, but it was like trying to patch a leaking dam with tissue. The damage was done. My fiancée looked pale, visibly shaken, and I realized that this day, which I had dreamed about for so long, was being tainted by my brother's deliberate sabotage. I remember thinking, how can someone you love so much be capable of such cruelty? His laughter echoed through the hall, and I wanted to disappear. Every plan, every meticulous detail, every happy expectation was crumbling around me, and all I could do was sit there and endure it, trying not to explode in anger. After the speech, the atmosphere didn't recover. Guests were exchanging uncomfortable glances, some laughing nervously, unsure if they should react. I could hear murmurs like tiny waves of judgment washing over me, and every sound felt amplified in my ears. My brother was smirking, clearly enjoying the tension he had created, while I felt frozen in a mixture of anger and disbelief. During dinner, he didn't let up. He started telling exaggerated stories about my past, painting me as irresponsible and childish, while adding sly digs about my fiancée. "Remember when you thought you could start that project and failed miserably?" he said, raising his glass as if everyone should join in the humiliation. I wanted to vanish. My fiancé kept glancing at me, eyes wide, and I could see the shame creeping onto his face. That I tried to distract the guests, making jokes and forcing laughter, but every attempt fell flat. The room felt heavy, suffocating even, and I realized that my brother had poisoned the day completely. My parents whispered to each other, avoiding eye contact with me, and I could tell they were torn between staying polite and admitting the truth, that their son had crossed a line. By the time the cake was served, the tension had barely lifted. My brother kept interrupting conversations, leaning into every group, whispering snide comments, and laughing at moments that weren't funny. Friends who had traveled long distances were now looking uncomfortable, unsure if they should leave or confront him. I felt like my wedding had been hijacked, every joyful expectation replaced by anxiety and dread. Later, when the dancing started, I hoped for some relief, some moment to breathe, but even then he found a way to insert himself. He accidentally spilled a drink on the groom's father and made a joke out of it in front of everyone, earning chuckles from a few guests and scowls from many. Every attempt to salvage the evening felt pointless. I kept thinking, how can one person cause this much chaos? At one point, My fiancé quietly pulled me aside. His hand shook, and he whispered, "I didn't expect this. I thought this would be perfect." Hearing that, I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but the truth was, the perfect day I had imagined was gone. My brother had turned it into a nightmare that I spent the rest of the evening in a fog, trying to focus on the few positive moments, the smiles of friends who were still supportive, the rare laughter that wasn't forced, but even those were tainted by the knowledge that my own brother had betrayed me in front of everyone I cared about. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and disbelief, wondering if family could ever be trusted again. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache, not just from the few glasses of champagne I had forced down to survive the night, but from the emotional weight pressing on me. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages from friends, cousins, even people I barely talked to at the wedding. Some were sympathetic, "I can't believe he did that to you," while others were less kind. Screenshots of group chats floated to me where guests were joking about how entertaining my brother had been, or saying things like, "At least it wasn't boring." I sat there scrolling, my stomach turning. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead it had turned into gossip material. I could almost hear my brother laughing, knowing he had made himself the center of attention. That my husband still feels strange to write that was quiet. Too quiet. He kept pacing the room, avoiding my eyes. Finally, he muttered, "I don't even know what to tell my parents. They're furious." That cut me deep because it wasn't just about me anymore. His family had seen everything, and I could feel their disappointment like a shadow hanging over us. When I called my mom to talk about it, she answered with this tired voice. Instead of being outraged like I hoped, she sighed and said, "You know how your brother is. He doesn't always think before speaking." That nearly broke me. He hadn't just not thought. He had planned. He had gone out of his way to humiliate me. And my mom was brushing it off like it was just another bad joke at a family dinner. The worst part? My dad agreed. It was inappropriate. "Sure," he said. But he didn't mean real harm. He just wanted to lighten the mood. I wanted to scream. Lighten the mood? By calling me irresponsible in front of my in-laws? By spilling drinks and interrupting the entire ceremony? That wasn't lightning. It was sabotage. That I realized in that moment that I couldn't rely on my parents to see things clearly. They had always protected him, excused him, made it seem like his behavior was just part of his personality. And now, even with my wedding destroyed, they were still covering for him. That my husband, on the other hand, wasn't so forgiving. That night, he told me flat out, "If he ever sets foot in our house, I'm leaving." I stared at him, shocked, because I had never seen him this angry before. And honestly, I didn't blame him. The divide between my new family and the one I grew up with had never felt so wide. I was stuck in the middle, wondering how I could ever repair it, or if I even wanted to. Wow, I really stole the show, huh? People are still talking about it. I swear, my hands were shaking listening to it. He sounded proud of himself, like ruining the most important day of my life was some kind of performance he nailed. I replayed it 3 times, just to be sure. I hadn't misheard, but no, he was literally bragging. That I confronted him immediately. Texted back, "You humiliated me. You embarrassed my husband in front of his family. You ruined everything." His reply, "You're being dramatic. Everyone still had a good time, didn't they?" That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. See, growing up, I had always been the one to smooth things over. When he messed up, I'd cover for him. When he got into trouble, I'd defend him. When he crossed a line, I'd tell myself, he didn't mean it. But this wasn't some accident or misunderstanding. He had deliberately turned my wedding into his stage. That my husband overheard the messages and lost it. "If he ever comes near us again, I'll throw him out myself," he said. And honestly, I believed him. And here's the kicker. My parents still defended him. I showed them the messages, the laughing voice note. And do you know what my mom said? Well, at least he reached out. That's his way of saying sorry. Sorry. By mocking me, I realized then that they weren't just blind, they were enabling him. They had raised him to believe he could bulldoze over anyone and get away with it, because they'd always be there to soften the consequences. And I was done being part of that pattern. So, I told my mom straight. If you keep excusing him, then you're choosing him over me. The silence on the other end of the line said everything. She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just stayed quiet, and that quiet felt louder than anything my brother had said. After that phone call with my mom, something shifted in me. It wasn't just about my brother anymore. It was about the whole family dynamic I had been stuck in for years without even fully realizing it. I kept replaying all those little moments from childhood that suddenly made sense now. Like the time I saved up birthday money to buy myself a pair of headphones, and he just borrowed them until they broke. My parents told me to share because he's your little brother. Or the time he wrecked my car when he was still learning to drive, and instead of making him pay for repairs, my dad gave me a lecture about responsibility and told me not to hold a grudge that IT was always the same. He messed up, I paid the price, and my parents acted like I was overreacting if I dared to complain. So here I was, years later, married, building a new life, and the same pattern had followed me straight into my wedding day. I talked it through with my husband that night. He was still furious, but he also said something that stuck with me. If we let them, your family will keep treating us like background characters in his show. You have to decide how much space you want them to take in our life. And he was right. For the first time, I wasn't just thinking about myself anymore. It wasn't just my boundaries being crossed. It was our marriage, our future. The next morning, I messaged my brother, "You're not welcome in my life until you understand what you did and actually apologize." Predictably, he sent back a string of laughing emojis and something like, "Guess you can't take a joke." That was it for me. I blocked his number. When my parents found out, they called me crying. My dad said, "Family is everything. You can't just cut him out." But the more they tried to guilt me, the stronger I felt about my decision. Because, honestly, family shouldn't mean letting someone trash your happiest moments and then pretending it's fine. For once, I wasn't the one bending. I wasn't the one smoothing things over. And it felt weirdly good. Scary, yes, but freeing. I honestly thought that after the wedding, after that humiliating speech, things would eventually calm down. Like, time heals, people forget, we move on. But nah, it was the complete opposite. Every family gathering after that felt like I was walking straight into a play where everyone knew their lines except me. My brother? Acting like nothing ever happened. Sitting at the table, cracking jokes, drinking beer, like he hadn't literally tried to torch my marriage in front of both of our families. And when I stared at him, waiting for some kind of apology, he'd just shrug or look away, like I was being dramatic. My mom kept saying the same crap on repeat. "Honey, he's your brother. He didn't mean it like that. You can't stay mad forever." And I just sat there thinking, not mean it? He stood up in front of 150 people and dropped that bomb. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a slip. That was calculated. But the worst part? The whispers, the looks, the cousins and aunts leaning a little too close when I passed by, talking just a bit quieter whenever I entered the room. And I knew exactly what they were saying. Maybe he was hiding something. Drunk. Words are sober thoughts, right? You know, sometimes brothers just tell the truth, no one else will. It was like the whole room had decided I was guilty until proven innocent. And how the hell do you prove you didn't do something? And then there was my wife. She never outright accused me of anything, but something shifted. I could feel it. Like, every argument, no matter how small, eventually circled back to it. One time we were fighting about groceries of all things, and she snapped, "At least I don't keep secrets from my family." That line cut deeper than anything my brother had said, because it meant she wasn't over it. She didn't trust me the same way anymore. So yeah. Imagine sitting in your own house, eating dinner with your wife, and realizing your brother managed to ruin more than just a wedding day. He planted this seed of doubt, and now it was choking everything. The noise in the hall had that sticky, low hum the moment after a fire alarm shuts off. Everyone pretending things were normal while the air still tasted like smoke. The DJ tried to save it with some upbeat throwback, but you could feel the room tightening, tables turning into little islands of gossip. My drink was warm in my hand. I didn't remember picking it up. My mother-in-law marched over first. Perfume sharp, heels hitting the floor like punctuation. "Is it true?" she asked. No preface, no small talk. "Did you hide something from our family?" My mouth opened, and nothing. Heat crawled up my neck. Behind her, two of my husband's aunts hovered, pretending to adjust their shawls. Very much not pretending to listen. My best man slid in like a bodyguard. "Not here," he said quietly, hand on my elbow. "Don't give them a statement on a dance floor." I nodded. grateful for someone who remembered we were still at a wedding and not a deposition. Across the room, my brother was holding court like he'd just headlined a comedy set. People were leaning in, half shocked, half delighted by the chaos. He loved that, being the center of an emergency. He caught my eye and lifted his glass like cheers. The audacity made the room tilt. "Say something," my husband whispered. His voice had that brittle edge, the one that says I need you to fix this so I don't have to. "Like what?" I said. "Hi everyone. Please stop believing a drunk man with a mic." That one. He flinched. I hated myself for the bite in my tone, but I was bleeding out and everyone wanted me to smile. Oh, I forgot to mention, my dad tried to make it better. He stepped onto the little stage, cleared his throat, and said something like, "Let's focus on love tonight." The exact sentence people say when they don't plan to address anything real. Half the room clapped. The other half checked their phones. "Look at me," my mother-in-law said again, lower now, almost pleading. "If there's something we should know, there isn't," I said. "There is a brother who likes to set fires and call it honesty." Her face did that tight, "I heard you but I don't believe you" thing. I wish I could say that was the worst part. But no, the worst part was the disappointment in her eyes. Not at him. At me. For not making the mess cleaner. Meanwhile, my maid of honor was doing tree-off. She intercepted curious cousins with weaponized small talk, pulled the microphone from the DJ booth for a request, and whispered, "Breathe. You're shaking." I hadn't noticed I was. My hands were buzzing like I'd stuck them in an outlet. Someone at the next table, coworker plus one, I think, laughed and said, "Well, hey, at least it's memorable." I turned so fast my chair scraped. My best man's hand pressed my shoulder back down. "Not worth it," he murmured. He was right. I swallowed the retort, and it burned my chest on the way down. Then my brother sauntered over. Of course he did. The circle around us opened the way people move when a fight's about to start, but no one wants to miss it. "Hey, relax," he said, grin bright, voice too loud. It was a joke. "People are laughing. You should be thanking me for keeping it lively." I stared at the knot in his tie. "You don't get to call arson a candle," I said. He chuckled, leaned closer. If there was nothing to hide, why are they asking questions? Something in me snapped like a wet match. "Because you lit them," I said. "Because you always do." My mom arrived 2 beats late, eyes already shiny, saying my name like a peace offering. "Sweetheart, he didn't mean, stop." I said soft but flat. "Just stop translating him." She closed her mouth. It was the first time I'd ever seen her obey the boundary mid-sentence. The DJ, saints bless him, cut the music and asked everyone to gather for the first dance. Hey, mercy. People drifted away in that sticky, reluctant way crowds do when they're told to. My brother started to say something else. Of course he did. But my husband stepped in front of me at last, palm up. "Not now," he said. Not loud. Just final. It surprised both of us that we danced. The song felt too slow for a room this hot. With speculation. He didn't look at me for the first 30 seconds. I counted them in my head. When he finally did, his eyes were glassy. "I don't know what to do," he said. And it wasn't accusation. It was confession. "Me neither." I said, "But I know what I won't do." "What's that?" Let him write our whole story. Tiny detail. The venue smelled like frosting and spilled champagne and the lemon cleaner they used in the bathrooms. I remember that because I focused on it to keep from crying. Anchor yourself to the ordinary, my therapist had once said. The ordinary will keep you from drowning. That be why the time the song ended, the murmurs had softened to a manageable hum. Not gone. Just background. We thanked the DJ. We cut the cake. People cheered a little too loud, like applause could pave over the crater. Fine. We let them try. Edit. I just remembered. The caterer slipped me a bottle of water and said, "You don't owe them an explanation tonight." A stranger with more sense than half my family. I held that sentence like a talisman in my fist. It helped. The morning after, the house felt too quiet, like it had absorbed all the noise from the night before and held it against me. I trudged down the stairs, bare feet cold on the hardwood, and saw the living room still littered with party decorations. Cups tipped over, napkins stuck to the floor with dried champagne that I tried to make coffee, but even the smell was tainted. My brother's words from last night echoed like nails on metal. If there's nothing to hide, why are they asking questions? I kept hearing that over and over. It wasn't just a joke. It was an accusation. And somehow, Everyone had sided with him without asking a single question that I thought about calling my husband. But every time I reached for my phone, I froze. I didn't want to fight. Not yet. Not over something so fundamentally broken. Instead, I walked outside. The air was crisp, the faint smell of wet grass after a storm. I sat on the porch, watched the sky bleed orange and pink, and tried to remember why I had even thought this day would be perfect. Then my brother called. Of course he did. Ringing twice, voicemail immediately. "Hey, just checking in," he said in that infuriatingly casual tone. "Don't be mad. We were all just having fun, right?" Fun. That word made bow rise. I wanted to throw my phone across the yard, but I didn't. I wanted him to know I wasn't going to respond. That was my first victory. Later, my husband came out. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a mug of coffee. We sipped in silence. Finally, he said, "I think they're still trying to control things. And I think they're scared of what we've built without them." I nodded. That hit me harder than anything last night. Because he was right. They had been shaping everything. My decisions, my life, my marriage, for as long as I could remember. And last night proved they still believed they could not be why noon. We had a small strategy session. We listed boundaries, discussed who could enter our house, and who we'd keep at a distance for the foreseeable future. My brother? Not on the list of welcome visitors anytime soon. My parents? Conditional. My husband? The only person allowed to speak on our behalf. I felt the first real sense of control I'd had in months. The small victories mattered. Even if the world outside didn't notice, we noticed. And slowly, over that weekend, I realized something crucial. Their drama didn't get to define me. Not anymore. Oh, and the funny detail? My brother texted again later that day. "Don't be upset. It's all in good fun." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "You don't get to define what's fun in my life." And I hit send. By evening, the house had quieted completely. I sat on the couch, mug warm in my hands, husband beside me, and finally felt a little peace. Not the kind that erases the past, but the kind that reminds you the future is still yours. The morning after, the house felt too quiet, like it had absorbed all the noise from the night before and held it against me. I trudged down the stairs, bare feet cold on the hardwood, and saw the living room still littered with party decorations. Cups tipped over, napkins stuck to the floor with dried champagne that I tried to make coffee, but even the smell was tainted. My brother's words from last night echoed like nails on metal. If there's nothing to hide, why are they asking questions? I kept hearing that over and over. It wasn't just a joke. It was an accusation. And somehow, everyone had sided with him without asking a single question that I thought about calling my husband. But every time I reached for my phone, I froze. I didn't want to fight. Not yet. Not over something so fundamentally broken. Instead, I walked outside. The air was crisp, the faint smell of wet grass after a storm. I sat on the porch, watched the sky bleed orange and pink, and tried to remember why I had even thought this day would be perfect. Then my brother called. Of course he did. Ringing twice, voicemail immediately. "Hey, just checking in," he said in that infuriatingly casual tone. "Don't be mad. We were all just having fun, right?" Fun. That word made bow rise. I wanted to throw my phone across the yard, but I didn't. I wanted him to know I wasn't going to respond. That was my first victory. Later, my husband came out. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a mug of coffee. We sipped in silence. Finally, he said, "I think they're still trying to control things. And I think they're scared of what we've built without them." I nodded. That hit me harder than anything last night. Because he was right. They had been shaping everything. My decisions, my life, my marriage, for as long as I could remember. And last night proved they still believed they could not be why noon. We had a small strategy session. We listed boundaries, discussed who could enter our house, and who we'd keep at a distance for the foreseeable future. My brother? Not on the list of welcome visitors anytime soon. My parents? Conditional. My husband? The only person allowed to speak on our behalf. I felt the first real sense of control I'd had in months. The small victories mattered. Even if the world outside didn't notice, we noticed. And slowly, over that weekend, I realized something crucial. Their drama didn't get to define me. Not anymore. Oh, and the funny detail? My brother texted again later that day. "Don't be upset. It's all in good fun." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "You don't get to define what's fun in my life." and I hit send. By evening, the house had quieted completely. I sat on the couch, mug warm in my hands, husband beside me, and finally felt a little peace. Not the kind that erases the past, but the kind that reminds you the future is still yours. The next morning, sunlight streamed in through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar, feeling the bitterness match my mood. Last night's small victories felt fragile, like a sandcastle at the edge of the tide. The office, whispers still floated around. I overheard someone mutter, "I didn't know that was true," as I passed. Normally, I'd be furious. Now, I just kept walking, letting it wash over me. I had bigger battles to fight, and petty gossip wasn't worth my energy. Later, my manager stopped me in the hallway. "I know things have been messy, but you're handling it well. Don't let them get to you." Their words grounded me more than I expected. Just hearing that acknowledgement made the chaos outside seem smaller. During lunch, I noticed a coworker I'd barely spoken to smile and wave. Small gestures mattered. I returned it, and she leaned over. "I've got your back, just so you know." That tiny reassurance meant more than any formal apology from the others. By evening, I returned home, exhausted. The apartment smelled faintly of the candles I'd lit earlier, vanilla and cinnamon. My dog ran up to greet me, tail wagging furiously, ignoring the world's complications. I laughed, scratched behind his ears, and realized how much I'd needed this simple connection. The phone buzzed. Another text from my brother. I stared at it, but didn't open it. The impulse to react had faded. I was done letting him dictate my emotions. My boundaries were solid, my support system small, but real. My husband came home, carrying groceries. We unpacked them together, joking over who bought the most ridiculous snack. Laughter felt like rebellion, an act of defiance against all the toxicity that had tried to invade our lives. Later, I journaled a little, writing thoughts that had been swirling all day. No structure, no edits, just me spilling on a paper. I wrote about fear, anger, relief, hope. By the time I finished, my chest felt lighter, my mind quieter. Dinner was quiet, just the two of us, with the dog at our feet. Normal, ordinary, but precious. We didn't need grand gestures or apologies from the world outside. We had each other, our home, and the knowledge that even after betrayal, life could still feel like ours. Finally, I curled up on the couch, laptop forgotten, watching the city lights flicker outside. The hum of life beyond our walls was a reminder. The world didn't stop, and neither would I. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger. And that, more than anything, felt like victory. The next morning, I woke up to the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. It felt like the sky mirrored my mood. Heavy, uncertain, but cleansing in its own way. I made breakfast slowly, savoring the warmth of toast and the sharp taste of black coffee. At work, the tension had shifted subtly. People no longer whispered as blatantly, but glances lingered longer than necessary. I caught snippets. "Did you see what happened yesterday?" And "I think she's finally standing up for herself." I smiled faintly. That was all the acknowledgement I needed. During a team meeting, my colleague tried a subtle jab about last week's incident. I countered calmly, presenting facts and evidence. No anger, no drama. The room fell silent. Even my manager nodded approvingly. I felt the power of restraint, and that it could speak louder than rage. After work, I walked home through puddles, shoes soaked, hair damp, and felt oddly liberated. The chaos of the past weeks seemed distant in the rhythm of my steps. Each splash reminded me of small rebellions, little victories, my own resilience. Back home, I found a note from my husband tucked into the fridge. "You're stronger than you think. Don't forget it." Simple words, but they hit deep, grounding me. I folded it carefully and stuck it on the counter, a quiet talisman against the storm of life outside. Dinner was light, pasta and salad, but the conversation was rich. We laughed over shared memories, planned for small weekend adventures, and debated which movie to watch. Normal life felt revolutionary after weeks of manipulation and stress. Later, I organized a corner of my office at home, clearing clutter, labeling files, and making space to breathe. Each action felt symbolic, reclaiming territory, reclaiming control. My brother's messages still pinged occasionally, but I no longer checked them. They no longer demanded my attention. By nightfall, I curled up with a book, the rain a soft percussion on the roof. Thoughts of betrayal and frustration floated by, but I let them pass without grasping. The world was still loud, messy, and imperfect, and so was I. And that was enough. The weekend arrived with a strange kind of anticipation. I wasn't expecting drama, but after everything, I braced myself anyway. My husband suggested a short hike nearby, a change of scenery, fresh air, and a chance to reset. I agreed, hoping the outdoors could wash some of the tension out of my chest. That we started up the trail, the path muddy from recent rain. Birds called overhead, and the smell of wet earth filled my lungs. Every step reminded me that life was still moving, still breathing, beyond the confines of office politics and family chaos. Halfway up, my husband paused. "Look at this view," he said, gesturing toward the valley below. Fog hugged the trees, and the distant city looked tiny, almost insignificant. I felt a strange calm. It was as if the world had shrunk just for us, giving me space to remember who I was outside the drama. We talked about small things, future trips, hobbies we'd neglected, even silly what-if scenarios. The laughter was genuine, not forced. Each joke, each smile, felt like reclaiming pieces of life that had been overshadowed by manipulation and betrayal. On the way back, we stopped at a little creek. I kicked at the water, watching ripples spread. My husband laughed at me, but I didn't care. It was liberating, momentary, yes, but real. The weight of last week's tension lifted slightly with every ripple. By evening, we returned home, muddy shoes abandoned by the door, jackets hung carelessly. The apartment smelled faintly of dinner cooking, a simple stir-fry with garlic and herbs. I chopped vegetables while my husband set the table, our quiet teamwork a small, comforting ritual. Later, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and pink. I thought about my brother, about the office, about the chaos I had endured, but the anger had softened, replaced by clarity. I understood that boundaries, persistence, and self-respect had shifted the balance. I wasn't powerless anymore. As night fell, I read a few chapters of a novel, letting the story absorb me. My dog curled at my feet, a warm weight of comfort and loyalty. The world outside remained unpredictable, but inside, in this small sanctuary, I could breathe, plan, and heal. Monday morning came with an almost surreal calm. I woke to sunlight spilling across the bedroom, my dog snuggled at my feet, and my husband humming softly while making coffee. It was mundane, ordinary, and yet profoundly reassuring. After weeks of tension at work, the atmosphere had shifted. Again, the colleague who'd started the rumors now kept a noticeable distance. Whispers were quieter, cautious, almost apologetic. Even people who had joined in on the gossip avoided direct eye contact. It was as though the tide had turned subtly, invisibly, but unmistakably. I focused on my tasks, letting achievements speak for me. Reports were precise, emails courteous but firm, and every interaction reminded me that I still had control over my own narrative. I noticed small gestures, a nod from a teammate, a brief smile from someone who had ignored me last week. Validation, quiet but real. During lunch, I found myself sharing a table with two colleagues I barely knew. Conversation was casual, lighthearted, with little laughter breaking the routine hum of the cafeteria. I realized that the bonds I'd feared lost were simply waiting for the right moment to resurface. Back home, the evening was calm. We cooked together again, the kitchen filling with the scent of herbs and sizzling vegetables. My husband joked about my chopping skills, and I retaliated by flicking a piece of onion at him. Laughter echoed through the apartment, a stark contrast to the silence of recent weeks. Later, I took a moment to reflect in my journal. Not the edited, structured version, but raw thoughts flowing freely. Fears, frustrations, triumphs, and lessons. Writing reminded me of my resilience, the way I had navigated both betrayal and self-doubt. Before bed, I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. My brother's texts and my family's calls no longer weighed on me. I had survived, adapted, and found peace in small victories. Life was messy, unpredictable, but undeniably mine.